With the 15th pick and with the 26th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft, the Washington Redskins select Dwayne Haskins, Montez Sweat.
Welcome, all my fellow Redskin brethren and sistren. I am your man and resident Redskins fan, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on the Redskins Report. So, the first day officially of the start of the new league year. Happy New Year! As the Redskins continue their very meager, ho-hum free agency period, I must say that I'm more encouraged by the signings of today than that of the previous 2 days. Now, I am excited about Kendall Fuller coming home and anxious to see what he looks like back in a burgundy and gold uniform. Will he be a safety? Will he be a corner? Will he be both? I don't know. Will he play inside? Will he play outside? I can't answer those questions, but I'm anxious to see what they have in store for Kendall Fuller. Thomas Davis, what does he have left in the tank? I'm not sure if there's much left there or not. He is up there in age. Anxious to see what that means. What does all of the linebackers that they added to this roster mean anyway? Does it mean that Reuben Foster is a guy that they don't see as a part of their long-term future? Remember, that was a get of the last regime, okay? Ron Rivera has no ties to Reuben Foster whatsoever. And so maybe Ron Rivera doesn't think he fits in his culture. You know, Ron Rivera is a guy with a lot of strong principles, a lot of things he believes in. Reuben Foster doesn't necessarily fit into that, if you know what I mean. So there are a lot of questions. I mean, the Redskins went after the linebacker position as if it was a position of desperate need. Now, maybe they don't love the backers on the roster as is. Or maybe that's them trying to tell us that they don't believe in Reuben Foster long term. Whatever the case may be. And look, none of these signings have been big time, long-term contracts. The biggest contract we've signed to date this offseason is that of Kendall Fuller, and none of these are official. Let me reiterate that. None of these have officially been deemed done by the league, which is why on the Redskins Twitter feed, they're not allowed to actually announce the signings of these players. They have to talk about the reports that say that these players are going to sign with the Redskins. Nonetheless, Kendall Fuller's 4-year, $40 million deal is the longest deal the Redskins have signed any player to this offseason. John Bostic is a 2-year deal. Wes Schweitzer is a 3-year deal. I'm assuming Thomas Davis is going to be a 1-year deal. Won't be any longer than 2. The deal for Kevin Pierre-Louis, 1 year. The Sean Davis deal sounds like a 1-year deal, okay? Nate Orchard is back, I'm assuming, on a 1-year deal, all right? The Redskins are pretty much putting themselves in a position to have a lot of guys compete. None of these contracts are etched in stone. None of these guys technically have to make the football team. They're not making enough money that says they won't get cut if they don't perform high enough in the offseason. As we get to training camp and into the preseason, if these guys are outperformed by draft picks or other guys that they may bring in after the draft as undrafted rookies, these guys aren't guaranteed anything. Kevin Pierre-Louis is not guaranteed to make this football team. All right? Neither is John Bostic. Neither is Wes Schweitzer, even though I'm pretty sure Wes Schweitzer and his $4.5 million are going to make this roster. None of these guys have been inked to a long-term deal outside of Kendall Fuller that ensures that they're going to be here, past August. So it's really interesting to see what the Redskins have done this offseason. And honestly, I've talked about this numerous times that we really don't know how they feel about this roster. We don't know how they feel about Monte Nicholson. We don't know what they think of, Ryan Anderson. We don't know how they feel about Troy Apke. We don't know how they feel about Fabian Moreau. Hell, half of us don't even know how we feel about Fabian Moreau. But That's really the big question is when you get a new regime in here and there's a bunch of guys left from the old regime and there's a lot of leftover guys and you haven't seen a ton of turnover, which we haven't. You really don't know what that means. It could mean that they're waiting to turn this roster over next year, which is why you're getting all these one-year deals. Or it could be a situation where they like a lot of these players. And Ron Rivera did say when he took this job, part of the reason he took the job was because he really liked the roster and thought it was pretty talented. But who are those guys? We know that the front seven is talented, or at least the defensive line is talented. You know, we know there's some players on this team that can play ball. But there are some question marks. And I think we're starting to get a feel for what they think about, say, the safety position. They went out and got Sean Davis, not just as a stopgap. It is a 1-year, $5 million deal. But if Sean Davis comes in and plays good ball, he could be back here next year. It's a tryout of sorts for Sean Davis. It's what we call in the trade a prove-it deal. If he proves it, he'll either get paid by us or some other team out there. If he doesn't, he'll be on a one-way ticket halfway out of the league. 1 foot will be in the door, 1 foot will be out of the door. So, but Sean Davis has been brought in here to compete to start, which tells us they don't believe in Monte Nicholson. They don't believe in Troy Apke. They want to have another guy in here with a chance to win the starting job. All right. So that kind of gives us a little bit of insight as to how they view the safety position. They view that free safety spot right now as vacant. There isn't a guy right now occupying that spot. I think you could say a lot of the same for the linebacker positions. I don't know if they have a concrete 3 guys that they want to insert into the lineup. I'd like to think that one of those guys is going to be Cole Holcomb. I'd like to think that, but I'm not sure. You know, heard Ron Rivera reference his name earlier in the offseason when he was talking about versatility on this roster, and Cole Holcomb was one of the names he brought up. So maybe Cole Holcomb is one of those guys penciled in. I think Ryan Anderson is penciled in as a strong side backer, and I think Cole Holcomb is penciled in right now as a weak side backer. Who's your middle linebacker? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And I think that's another one of those positions where they may be looking for one maybe in the draft. Who's to say? Nickel is, I think, a position that is interesting because don't know if Kendall Fuller's going to occupy that or man it up, or if they view him. And by them going out and getting Sean Davis, that tells me that they think that that Kendall Fuller is a corner. Now, is he an inside corner or is he an outside corner? Is he going back to the slot, which is where I think he's best and better served, or is he going out to the boundary? I think he struggles out there a little bit. It'll be interesting to see what they think about him and where they think he will be best utilized. But one thing's for sure, they view him as a corner and more or less of a corner than a safety because they wouldn't have went out and got Sean Davis if they felt like they already had their free safety on the roster. So I think it's pretty safe to say they view Kendall Fuller as a cornerback. But you look at the 3 signings that the Redskins made today. They re-signed Nate Orchard. Let's start there because I remember I was doing a Redskin video. I want to say it was either this past week or the week prior. I want to say it was this past week here. And my man BD, Barrett Downing, hit me with a super chat. I believe it was my man BD. I'm going to charge this to his account. But BD asked, man, what about Nate Orchard? Are the Redskins going to re-sign him? Are they going to keep him around? I really like him. And I was like, yeah. I don't think Nate Orchard's going to be back. He had that one game against Carolina that was really memorable. We didn't have many memorable moments and memorable games in 2019, but the Carolina Panthers game probably stands out above the rest. You had the dominant rushing performance from Adrian Peterson. You had a dominant rushing performance from Geis. Dwayne Haskins was clean that game in terms of his interception count. He managed the game really well, made some good throws, put the Redskins in position. And really all he had to do was hand the football off in that game. The Panthers had no answer for the rushing attack. And remember, we fell down 14-0 in that game early, battled back, and then ended up taking a commanding lead before having to hold on for dear life at the very end. And one of the biggest plays made in that game was by Nate Orchard stopping their all-world back, Christian McCaffrey, at the 1 yard line as he was going to go in for a touchdown. And so, or I think it's at more like the 2 yard line, but whatever the case may be, had he not made that tackle, he was going to score and we were probably going to lose that football game. But I digress. I didn't think Nate Orchard was going to be back, and I had made a comment like, hey, he was a guy that was picked up because of all the injuries, and hopefully now we're going to be in a spot where we don't need the Nate Orchards of the world. Well, let me say this. I liked Nate Orchard. I really wanted to see more. Remember, I would come on every week after the game and talk about how I'd like to see more Nate Orchard. I want to see him get an opportunity. But, with the last coaching staff, it seemed like the obvious wasn't. So Nate Orchard didn't get enough snaps, in my opinion. And I didn't think he was going to have a chance to come back. But here's the irony in everything. The best game that he had in 2019 happened to be against the guy that is now currently coaching this team in Ron Rivera. Ron Rivera watched Nate Orchard single-handedly destroy the Carolina Panthers in that game. He was all over the football field. It was fun to watch. And because of his performance in that game, I think it got him an opportunity to at least get a tryout with the Redskins this year. And again, I don't know the parameters of his deal. I'm assuming it's a 1-year deal. It's nothing really to write home about. I just think it's one of those situations where he's going to get an opportunity to come in here and see if because I think we have one more spot at defensive end. Because normally teams go into the season with 4 defensive ends in a 4-3 defense. Right now we have 3. Montez Sweat, we're going to have Chase Young, and Ryan Kerrigan. And I think after that, you're still missing one guy. Now, Ryan Anderson on third downs, if they so choose, can double as a pass rusher. But I think they're going to add one more defensive end, pass rusher. And I think Nate Orchard has a legitimate shot of being that guy. They're going to bring in some guys after the draft that were undrafted, and there are going to be some guys competing with him. Don't forget, still on the roster is the Oklahoma State pass rusher that we took in the 7th round that I really, really liked. If he comes back healthy and shows some of the flashes that I saw on tape, he's got some juice, he's got some giddy up. He could be a guy that makes this football team. So Nate Orchard is a guy that we're all familiar with. Saw him towards the tail end of the season last year. Played well. He blocked a punt against the Giants. He destroyed the Lions, had like 2 sacks in that game. And like I talked about the big-time tackle of Christian McCaffrey down around the goal line to preserve that victory. He was magnificent versus the Panthers. And so this is a guy that's going to get an opportunity. And I like Nate Orchard since he came into the league out of Utah. And, it's funny because he's been cut at least 4 or 5 times in his career. This guy's been all over the place, Miami and Buffalo and, Cleveland. And he was on Hard Knocks, and one of the guys featured on Cleveland's Hard Knocks about 3 years ago. He's been all over the map, has Nate Orchard, trying to find his way in this league and trying to find somewhere to stick. I thought about James Harrison when we made this signing and how he got cut like 7 times. Early in his career, just couldn't find a way to make a roster. And then finally he stuck with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and look what he did, the remainder of his career. Not saying that that's what's going to happen to Nate Orchard, but, maybe one of these opportunities, he finally is able to get comfortable and find a home and carve out a niche for himself in this league. Maybe it's with the Redskins. Maybe it's not. We'll see. But he's going to get an opportunity. I'm happy to see him back, and let's see what he's able to do. Now, Sean Davis was one of the more prominent signings of the day, and one of the more prominent signings the Redskins have had this entire offseason period. Now, obviously, Kendall Fuller is going to jump off the screen at you, and he's the guy that received the most money in the most years to this point. But Sean Davis is a guy that the Redskins brought in on a prove-it deal, 1 year, $5 million, to come in here and prove that he is the answer opposite Landon Collins. I remember Sean Davis from his days at Maryland, and I remember scouting him. And one of the things I put down in my notes, because I remember when he was at Maryland, they played him at corner, and he moved like a corner. He had movement skills like a corner, but athleticism that said safety. So it was interesting because he could run, he had the length, he had everything you were looking for, but his transition out of breaks and his ability to plant and drive and all of those things, the way he flipped his hips, he was tight. He looked like a safety. And I remember putting down in my notes, he looks like a corner, has athleticism like a corner, but his movement skills are that of a safety. But the problem with Sean Davis is that if you moved him to safety, which ultimately ended up being his position at the next level, he still had the mindset of a corner. He didn't tackle like a safety. He tackled like a corner. And that was going to be his undoing, I thought. And that's what I had in my notes when I looked back at, the draft that he was in and what I wrote down and what I saw. And one of his biggest faults in Pittsburgh was his inability to make tackles out in space at times. Like, he's got the ability to drop over the slot as a free and play nickel for you if need be. He's got that kind of ability, and he's a guy that can play all over the field. He's got speed. He's got range. He's a guy that has ball skills because, again, he's an ex-corner. So there's a lot to like with him, but Sean Davis is a guy that if you're going to leave him as your last line of defense, you can find yourself giving up a 62-yard touchdown run. You could find yourself giving up a 71-yard touchdown catch because he's this guy coming in like a missile, hot, but not making the tackle, or he's a guy that's going to break down and get broken off out in space, and now it's off to the races for a touchdown. So the one thing I can respect about Landon Collins, his best work is done around the line of scrimmage. But if you tell Landon Collins, I need you to be my last line of defense, it may not be pretty, but Landon's going to get him down on the ground. I can't say the same thing for Sean Davis, which scares me because generally your free safety is your last line of defense. And he's not a guy you necessarily want back there. And he can play single high free safety. He can flourish in a cover 3. He can flourish in a cover 1 where he's the only guy back there. But if it's a run and it breaks into the secondary, I'm nervous. If it's a post and he's not able to get there, bang, bang, and he's got to make a tackle, I'm nervous. So he's a guy with some talent. And the Steelers, they thought he was going to be their safety of the future. He was their starter last year, and it was his injury that prompted them to go out and trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick. So he went down like week 2 or 3, whatever the Seahawks game was. I remember he went down with a torn labrum, what turned out to be a torn labrum, and it put them in a bind. And the Steelers then, turned to the rest of the league looking around for a guy to come in, and it happened to be Minkah Fitzpatrick that was available. He wanted out of Miami, and they were able to pounce. And so Sean Davis is a guy with some talent, man. And I'm anxious to see what he's able to do here with the burgundy and gold. And then finally, probably my favorite signing thus far of this entire free agency period is that of running back J.D. McKissic. Now, here's the thing with J.D. McKissic. It was funny because when I first tweeted out that I love this signing and I'm really excited to see what he's going to bring to the table, there was a Redskins fan that hit me up and he was like, you really think he's going to play behind AP, Geis, and potentially Bryce Love? And, my response to that, because I didn't respond to it, I just liked the post, is, yeah, I do. And this guy's so versatile. There's things you can do with him that you can't do necessarily with a Bryce Love and Geis or AD. Yeah, none of these guys really fit this kind of mold. And that mold is of a running back that can actually be a wide receiver as well. He doubles as a wide receiver. And, it's funny because I remember when J.D. McKissic came into the league out of Arkansas State, didn't think much of him at the time. And when I first took notice of him, it was a Sunday night game. I want to say it was back in like 2016 or 17, one of those two. I think it was 17. Don't quote me on that, though. And it was a Sunday night game, Seahawks versus the Indianapolis Colts. And I remember this game because it was a weird score at halftime. It was like 18-18 or 16-6. It was some kind of crazy score, 19-19, whatever it was. And Seattle just destroyed the Colts in the second half of that game. And I remember J.D. McKissic going off in that game. Had a touchdown run, had a ridiculous touchdown catch. And I remember doing the show that night, that Sunday Night Football show that night, saying, man, this J.D. McKissic guy is pretty damn impressive. And I remember the rest of that season, when he was in the lineup, the Seahawks were so explosive on offense, and then he had gotten hurt. And they in the next year, and they weren't the same offensively, and a lot of it stemmed from not having J.D. McKissic. He became a big weapon for Seattle in that 17 season, and they were really counting on him going into 2018, and he got hurt. And he ended up in Detroit the following year after that, and they had some other guys there. They went out and got LeGarrette Blount. They had the rookie out of Maryland, Ty Johnson. And so he just kind of was there in Detroit, but never really got the opportunity that I thought he was going to get. And this is a guy that I'm really excited about. As I mentioned, he can run it. He's got extremely quick feet, real good quickness. He's very fast. He's got excellent hands. At Arkansas State, he played a little bit of receiver, played some running back, so he's very versatile. You can throw it to him out of the backfield. And unlike any of the other backs we have, you can actually split this guy out. So he starts out in the backfield, and you can create a mismatch by sending him into motion. And now all of a sudden, he's got a linebacker with him one-on-one in space. He's going to eat him alive. And so this is a guy that, if utilized correctly, J.D. McKissic automatically comes in here and adds value to a team that you think doesn't actually need another running back. But when you ask me, can this guy get on the field? Absolutely, because he's not just like any of the backs we have. He creates mismatches. He's got a different element and dimension to his game that Bryce Love, I think, lacks, because Bryce Love wasn't a big pass catcher at Stanford. All right, even in his 2018 season that was historic, he wasn't a pass catcher that year for them. So he's not a guy that I think brings a ton of receiving value to the table. We know Geis wants a bigger role as a pass catcher, but Geis isn't a big receiver either. And we already know AD doesn't come equipped with a great receiving game. Now, he's gotten better over the years, but that's not his forte. You know, these guys aren't sticking their foot and breaking somebody off on a slant, or they're not going down the field and running a 12 back to 10. J.D. McKissic can do all of those things. So I love this signing. This is the one I'm the most excited about to date. You know, and I actually like what the Redskins are doing in free agency right now. I know there aren't a bunch of big signings, nobody you can really get excited about, and no one you can point to and say, all right, this guy's going to be a true difference maker for us. But in the grand scheme of things, you know what I really am most excited about is the fact that we're going to get to see all of these young players and all of these guys that we've thought were talented for a very long time on this roster, but not really getting to see it because of a coaching staff that was holding them back. We're going to get to see these guys. And I think they feel like these guys are more talented than may have been shown because of the way they were being coached, because of the system that they were being deployed in, because of the circumstances surrounding where they were, how they were being used, and the guys that were coaching them up and putting them in positions to either succeed or fail. And so, you know what? I don't want them to go out and get a bunch of big names. I want them to get the guys that they feel like can come in and compete. But more than that, I want to see these guys get opportunities to play. And we're going to see that, and we're going to see what they look like in a truly competent defense with competent coaching. And so I'm excited to see what happens and to see if some of these guys that we wrote off or we thought weren't that good or thought probably can move on from that guy, maybe we'll find out that 2 or 3 or 4 of these guys are actually much better than we thought, like a Ryan Anderson, for instance. I was done with Ryan Anderson 2 years ago. Last year, I was like, that Ryan wasn't that bad. But I was still like, after this rookie deal is up, I'm not beating down the door to try to get Ryan Anderson a contract to sign on the dotted line to come back. If he were to move on, I wouldn't be. Because to me, he looks like a Baltimore Raven. Smells like a Baltimore Raven. And I could see him going to Baltimore and having a very successful career. But maybe he could blow up here in Washington under Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio and their watch, and all of a sudden they utilize him correctly, and he shows that this guy has some real talent. We'll see. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how a lot of these guys perform. So I like some of these moves, and I think some of these guys will actually be able to come in and help right away. So looking forward to seeing what the Redskins continue to do in free agency. They've been actually pretty active. I know a lot of you were looking for the big splash moves, but just about every day they've signed 3 guys. So they've been really consistent with what they've done. No, let's see if we can get a quick count. Wes Schweitzer re-signed John Bostic, and they also had Kendall Fuller in day 1. Day 2, it was Thomas Davis, it was Kevin Pierre-Louis, and I think that was it. And I thought they re-signed one more person, but I guess that was it. That was 2 more. And then you have today 3 more guys being signed in J.D. McKissic, re-signed Nate Orchard, and also brought in Sean Davis. So that's 8 guys in just a little over 72 hours. So the Redskins have been extremely busy and aggressive. So I want to see what happens moving forward. Are they going to continue this aggressiveness throughout the rest of this week, or are we going to see them kind of take a step back, assess their situation, and go back into the field, or say, all right, let's turn our attention to the draft, or turn our attention to trying to move Trent Williams? I expect something to happen with that situation here shortly as well. I'm looking for some resolution, and I'm expecting that to come. It feels like a move with Trent has to happen for the rest of free agency to go down without a hitch. I think that rest of that tackle market is kind of waiting to see what happens with Trent Williams before some of these other guys get signed and these other dominoes fall. And so I want to see if this thing gets done with Trent here shortly or not. So that's where I am in free agency with this Redskins football team. Leave it in the comment section. How do you feel about free agency thus far? How do you feel about the free agents the Redskins signed? What's your favorite free agent that the Redskins have signed thus far? Kendall Fuller removed from the discussion. Who's your favorite Redskin signee to this point? Most of you are going to say Kendall Fuller. Some of you don't know any of these guys but Kendall Fuller. But which one of these guys strikes you as someone you're anxious to see and really excited about what they bring to the table for the burgundy and gold in the upcoming season? Leave it in the comment section. I am a Redskins fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Redskins spirit will never die. Redskins spirit will never fold. Until we meet again, hail to our beloved Washington Redskins. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the Louie T Network. If anything big happens, we may jump on and do something here in the next day or two. If nothing else happens, then we'll probably just wait, allow the moves to accumulate, and then jump on and kind of talk about all of them at once. But again, if anything happens, or if the Redskins continue to make a cluster of moves, and no big names, but a number of different guys, because we still need a tight end. We still need we still need a tight end. They could do something at tackle. They could still use, to me, a wide receiver. So they could not be done yet. There could be more moves in store for this team, or they could be done. They got a corner. They've stockpiled linebackers. They added some depth along the offensive line. They added a safety now. So they've done a lot of things. Question is, are they done, or are there more moves to make? And when does the Trent Williams deal finally happen? Because it's going to happen. It's a matter of when for me. Not if, but when. So those are the things I'm looking for. Leave it in the comment section. I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. Till next time, you guys take care. And make sure you like this video and subscribe if you haven't already done so. See you next time. Have a good one. Louie T Network.